Hey, this is Jake with the Tattoo Improvement Network, and welcome to another episode of Fireside Technique. Today we're going to talk about tattooing hands and knuckles and fingers. While I'm drawing this thing on here, I'm going to talk about kind of the unique challenges that hands pose. And by hands, really, I guess I mean more knuckles and fingers down towards the edges. Where I'm drawing right now on the hand is actually a pretty decent place to tattoo. It's not that difficult. It holds fairly well. The only thing I would say about the top of the hand is that it is exposed to the sun quite a bit, so you want to keep that in mind. It will slightly fade and blur a little bit over time, so you want to keep that in mind while you're actually laying the design out. Now, speaking of laying the design out, if I'll get my giant head out of the way, you'll see what I'm doing here. I'm drawing an octopus, and I've got some reference material that I keep looking back and forth at. But what I'm thinking, and this in my mind is the most important part of laying out a hand and knuckle tattoo, and that is how we determine where we focus the viewer's attention. So we want to simplify as much as possible when it gets down to knuckles and fingers, like I've kind of laid out there, and we want to focus the attention on the area that we can get the most detail in with the least amount of effort, and with also the area that that tends to hold up better for longer periods of time. So by that, I guess I mean I'm not going to go and try to put the most important areas down on his middle finger or down in his fingers at all. I'm going to focus the most important areas up on the palm of his, I'm sorry, not the palm, up on the back of his hand. So the eye, the head, is where my focal points will be. Now, notice that I'm trying to use his actual knuckles to create some of the little suckers on the tentacles. I'm drawing those directly on top of his knuckles. Doing that for a couple of reasons. First reason is that I'm trying to use the space as efficiently as possible, and that's an area that already kind of lends itself to that kind of shape. Since the knuckles are kind of round and those little suckers are kind of round, I thought that was a good reason to do that. The second reason is that I know that knuckles don't typically hold all that well, so I want some consistency in the inconsistency, I guess, for lack of a better term. So meaning if I were to lay a couple of those suckers up on his hand where they're going to hold really well, and then one or two of them fell down onto his knuckle, then I would have some inconsistencies within those little suckers. Whereas if I place them all on his knuckles or all in the same area, if they do fall out to a certain extent, at least they all kind of fall out the same, and they read kind of on the same plane. So that was my thought process there. Doesn't mean you have to do it that way. That's just the way that I approached this one. And then you'll notice as we move down that I'm getting more and more general, more and more abstract the further that I move down. Now, when it comes to lining, you can see I'm not making A to B lines. I'm using kind of a dark gray wash. I may even be using black there, but I'm just lightly kind of scraping those in. I know that I'm not going to have a lot of great crisp edges down on his fingers, so I'm not wasting a lot of time trying to get those edges. I'm just trying to give myself a permanent stencil from which to work. Also, if you've ever noticed a tattoo down on hands or fingers where some of it's fallen out, you'll notice a lot of times it's the fill that falls out, and you can still kind of see some of the scratchiness of the lines, which I think looks terrible. So another thing that I think of when I'm down on knuckles and fingers is I don't really want super solid lines. I want to use abstract shapes, whereas if it starts to fall out, I don't want to be real dependent on the sharp edges. Just because I know they're not going to stay sharp, and I also I want it to read as just a general shape, I guess. So you can see as we move up his hand that I'm kind of scumbling the line there. As we move up onto his actual hand, where I know it'll hold a little better, I'm a little more deliberate in the lines, kind of scumbling those things in. I know that I want that to be a nice bold edge, and I also know that I don't want to make 4 or 5 passes on it, so I'm kind of trying to give it a decent scumble right there on the front end. Moving up into his eye here, using solid black, trying to get a decent edge there. This tattoo will read as kind of painterly and atmospheric. There's not a lot of real crisp line work or sharp edges. So you can see, well, you can see right there, I've got all my lines laid in and they're just barely kind of washed in. There's not just a ton of really bold, clean lines. If you guys have watched this show for long, you know that I typically do most of my lining at the end. I like to come back at the end of my tattoos and ask myself, where are my 3 to 5 sharpest edges? Meaning, where do I want to push the viewer's attention? And then I'll just use my hardest lines for those areas. There's not a right or wrong when it comes to that. That's just the way that I like to handle it. All right, so I'm building some textures and stuff in here. I'm using kind of a big mag. I've already built a few textures in, and now I'm coming through and kind of just laying a wash over the entire area, just trying to get my dark shapes laid in there. So I'm trying to establish a light source and work my families of dark all from, say, 3, 4, 5 on the value scale, and leave my families of light in the 1, 2, and maybe 3 on the value scale. And so if I use a larger mag and kind of block that in on the front end, then it helps me to solve a lot of the problems that might show up later on. So now as I move into the lighter side, you can see I'm just kind of scraping through there, not doing a lot of like tiny circles. I'm really just kind of laying in textures fairly quickly, trying to identify my largest shapes and how the light or how those shapes are reacting to the light, I guess I should say, how the light is revealing those forms. So just kind of scraping those things in. Now you can see I'm coming back to my darker side here, and I'm laying in some of my darkest darks, and you'll also notice that I'll go into some of those highlight or highlit kind of areas, and I'll knock those back a little bit, because what I don't want is for the lights in my dark family there to start competing with the lights on the light side of the octopus. So meaning like on the top, that far side where the light's actually coming from, because that tends to flatten the shapes out, makes them want to read on the same plane. Now notice I'm going fairly dark, and I'm leaving that area of the tentacle where it goes down onto the knuckles as a really stark contrast, right? And the reason I'm doing that is because I know that that my detail needs to be in the area that it's going to hold up the longest. So, and I know the top of the hand is going to do better than the knuckles and the fingers. So I'm building a lot of texture and a lot of detail into the eyeball, into the knuckle, or I'm sorry, not into the knuckles, into the eyeball, into the upper tentacles, into the head, so that I can really simplify the lower areas. All right, now I'm making my way down into the knuckles, and you can see I'm using a smaller mag now. I've moved down to, I think that's a 5 mag, and I'm not making a lot of little circles, and this is just the way that I handle it, and it's not necessarily the right way or the way that you should handle it, but I kind of almost make small up and down marks to fill the space, and I'm just very slow, deliberate, and patient. This is sped up about double speed, so and it still looks fairly deliberate, so you can imagine at what pace I'm actually working. What I want to do is get that color packed in there as quickly and efficiently as I can, and I don't want to have to make multiple passes at it. So what I tend to do is back the machine off a little bit from a speed standpoint and work slowly and deliberately kind of up and down. I don't tend to do a lot of little circles, only because I don't like to get the mag moving sideways down in these areas. They tear really easily, and if you find yourself working too much on the edge of the mag, you can end up with these little kind of slits in the skin, or I've noticed that I've done that before, so I try to avoid it. Now I'm down here on the knuckle, and notice how I'm holding his finger. Make sure that you're always putting your client in the best position to stretch the skin, and you're not having to do all the work. So I've bent his finger, and then I get him to straighten it out a little bit so I can take a look at it. Then I'll bend it again, and I'm just moving it's hard to tell because of how it's sped up, but I'm moving very deliberately, and I'm trying to get that stuff packed in there as quickly as I can on the first go around. And notice that I'm not trying to do anything fancy down here, and I didn't do anything fancy with the suckers and tentacles on the knuckles, only because I know that it would all be for nothing. I know that some of that's going to fall out, and I just want the basic shape of it to read, right? I just want to get the point of what I was trying to do across, and all the attention is going to be driven up to the head of the octopus. So the further I move down, the more simplified and abstract my shapes are getting, and that is intentional because I know that detail in these areas is not going to hold. working right up to the edge, that kind of scratchy edge that I laid in with the liner. And I don't want that line to read. That's one of the reasons that is kind of sketched in the way that it is. I'm trying to use the mag to get up to that edge, but I don't want a really sharp edge with my liner because like I said, in these areas, from my experience, in these areas, if that color starts to fall out, you'll still see the line kind of separated from the color. And I think that's worse than just having all of it kind of fall out, on its own. At least then there's some consistency to it, and it doesn't look like you got a solid line and didn't get solid color. One other thing is that I had these darks up in the side of the head of the octopus, and then I used some medium grays to separate in the tentacle that is kind of more in the foreground that cuts across the knuckles. And then in the background tentacle, I went dark again. So I'm kind of staggering foreground, middle ground, background, going dark, light, dark. And that's just good practice because no matter what happens with how this thing heals down on the knuckles and fingers, I've pushed that contrast enough that the shapes themselves should read. So even if you don't know exactly what you're looking at, you should see some type of a pattern that that draws your attention in. So you're going, oh, that doesn't look, I can't tell exactly what that is, but it's an interesting pattern. I like how there's a light shape that cuts across his knuckles, and then some darks below it that kind of pushes that light forward. And so that's why I think it's so important when you start laying these kinds of things out to think in abstract shapes first. Try to find shapes that flow well with the body and forget that you're drawing an octopus or whatever it might be. Think just in terms of shape. Hey, that's it for this episode. Thanks a lot. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at tattooimprovement.com. Keep up with all the stuff that we're doing. We've got some trips lined up soon. We'll be interviewing some artists and, stuff like that. Thank you guys, as always, for supporting what we do.